Greetings everyone, I'm Adam Haritan, and if you are interested in learning the skills involved in foraging wild mushrooms, then this is a video that I encourage you to watch in its entirety. What I'm going to do over the next several minutes is cover some basic information as it relates to the identifying and collecting of wild mushrooms so that you can begin to develop a strong foundation that will support and carry you through all your future mycological endeavors. As you might imagine, the fungal kingdom is incredibly diverse and incredibly complex, and every year new information is discovered and published. Because of this complexity, it can be difficult for an absolute beginner to know where to start or how to best approach the subject matter. That's why I created this video, to make this whole process of learning a little bit easier and a little more exciting. So this video is meant to serve as a starting point in your educational process. By no means will the content in this video be exhaustive. Things will be left out, but I will do my best to lay a solid foundation and to provide enough information and inspiration to get you started. So, with all that in mind, let's begin to explore the wonderful world of mushrooms and more. The conventional wisdom, not so much folklore, but who's to decide what we must ignore? And let's begin our discussion with this obvious yet very important question. What is a mushroom? Well, a mushroom represents a single stage in the complex life cycle of a fungus, the fruiting stage. And this cycle begins when spores germinate into slender strands that grow and connect to form a larger network of filaments known as mycelium. Often hidden from plain sight, though very abundant in soil, leaf litter, and trees, the mycelial network of a fungus is responsible for, among many things, acquiring nutrients. When conditions are appropriate, mycelium can give rise to above-ground reproductive structures known as mushrooms. Now what's interesting, and bordering on perplexing, is that even though all mushrooms are members of kingdom fungi, not all fungi produce mushrooms. And the exact number of fungal species is unknown. Some researchers believe that there are between 1.5 to 5.1 million species of fungi, though a very recent estimate suggests that there are instead somewhere in the order of 12 million fungal species on planet Earth. So, what are all these fungi doing? Well, just like every other living organism on this planet, fungi are involved in elaborate relationships which we could reclassify as roles. Conveniently, the roles of fungi can be broken down into a few categories whose boundaries are actually not so clearly defined, but we will keep these boundaries in place for the current discussion. One category includes saprotrophic fungi. These fungi grow on decaying wood, on stumps, logs, sticks, forest litter, and fallen leaves. And saprotrophic fungi have the ability to break down plant cell wall compounds. Saprotrophic fungi are therefore considered to be decomposers. Another category of fungi includes parasitic fungi. These fungi grow on or within living substrates at the expense of their host substrates. Such substrates include living trees, plants, other mushrooms, animals, even humans. And a third category of fungi includes mycorrhizal fungi. These fungi form mutualistic symbiotic relationships with plants. Both organisms, the plant and the fungus, benefit in this relationship. The plants photosynthesize and create sugars in exchange for water, minerals, and other nutrients. So where do we find these fascinating mushrooms? And when can we find these mushrooms? Well, now that we already know a little bit about fungal ecology, we already have a better understanding of where we can find mushrooms. Forests and woodlands are excellent places to explore, and if you really want to increase your chances of finding certain types of mushrooms, specifically mycorrhizal mushrooms, then I strongly encourage you to learn tree identification and learn which trees form mycorrhizal associations where you live. Here in the Northeast/Mid-Atlantic region, trees that form mycorrhizal associations with mushrooms include oaks, beech trees, birch trees, hemlock trees, pine trees, and spruce trees. Of course, within forests, you will also find saprotrophic mushrooms on wood, including on logs, stumps, and standing snags. The leaf litter is also a good place to look for mushrooms, and if you're looking for some of the more obscure fungi, pay attention to insects and arachnids for the parasitic fungi that grow on these animal hosts. Fields and meadows are good places to look for fungi. Wood chips are excellent substrates for mushrooms. Garden beds provide optimal habitats for numerous species of fungi. And don't forget, animal dung can be a hotbed of mushroom activity. The trick is knowing when to look for mushrooms and timing your mushroom hunts perfectly. There are mushroom seasons, and it's important to know when these seasons occur in your region. Here in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic region, our mushroom season kicks off early spring and continues through mid to late autumn. Believe it or not, mushrooms even grow throughout the winter season around here. And of course, mushrooms really like rain. Generally speaking, ample rainfall is associated with mushroom formation. If you have a really wet summer season, for instance, well, you may also observe lots of mushrooms during this wet summer season. So learn the mushroom seasons where you live and keep in mind that rainfall and tree diversity have a lot to do with the number and diversity of mushrooms that you may observe in any given season. Now that we have a basic understanding of fungal biology and ecology, and we know when and where to find mushrooms, what specific anatomical features should we be looking for when attempting to identify a wild mushroom? Well, mushrooms come in all different colors and textures and shapes and sizes, and more often than not, they're full of surprises. So let's look at their features, their fringes and frills. Our first example, fungi with gills. Gilled fungi are among our most recognizable mushrooms. A gilled mushroom contains a spreading cap known mycologically as a pileus. Many gilled mushrooms have a stalk known mycologically as a stipe, though many gilled mushrooms do not have stipes. Underneath the cap is where you will find the fertile gills, which are known as lamellae, and these lamellae contain microscopic structures that forcibly discharge spores. Now, some gilled fungi, but not all, contain a few more structures worth mentioning. The first is the universal veil, which covers the entire immature mushroom and eventually breaks to leave behind patches on the cap surface, or even a sac-like structure at the base of the stem known as the vulva. Some gilled fungi also contain a partial veil, which covers the gills of an immature mushroom. This partial veil breaks to leave a ring or ring zone known as an annulus around the stem. Now clearly, not all mushrooms contain gills underneath their caps. Non-gilled fungi include polypore mushrooms, which have fertile tubes and pores underneath their caps, bolete mushrooms, which, like polypore mushrooms, typically have tubes and pores underneath their caps, toothed mushrooms, which have teeth or spines that contain fertile structures, chanterelles that have blunt folds or ridges, club and coral fungi, jelly fungi, puffball fungi, stinkhorn fungi, and crust fungi. Additional mushroom morphologies that you will routinely encounter include cup fungi, morel mushrooms, cordyceps fungi, and truffle-like fungi. Now, in addition to those features, a mushroom's spore color can be one way of acquiring a positive identification. And to observe the spore color, it may be necessary, at least when you're just starting out, to take a spore print. To take a spore print, you'll want to put the fertile side or the underside of a mushroom on some kind of surface. After several hours, check and see if your mushroom deposited its spores and note what color you see. Now, spore color alone will not tell you what mushroom you have, but spore color can be one effective way at helping you arrive at a positive identification after noting all those other features that we previously mentioned. So, we've covered a lot of ground so far, a lot of the basics, but nothing too bizarre. I think we're now ready to focus on hunting mysterious mushrooms that we'll be confronting. So let's switch gears to the actual harvesting of wild mushrooms, and let's kick off this section with the following often asked question. What should we bring with us on a mushroom hunt? Well, you actually don't need to bring many items or tools with you, but there are two things that I do consider indispensable when hunting and harvesting wild mushrooms. The first is a knife, so that you can cut your mushrooms, and any sharp knife will do. And the second is a collection vessel, whether it's a basket, a mesh bag, a wax bag, a paper bag, a tackle box, a backpack, just something to put your mushrooms in so that you don't have to carry them around in your pockets or in your t-shirt. Other items that you may wish to bring with you include a camera to document your finds, a brush to wipe off any debris, a hand lens to observe features that require magnification, and anything else that would make you feel comfortable in the woods. Personally, a knife, a basket or bag, and a camera are the things that I most often carry while exploring the woods for mushrooms. On the topic of knives, let's briefly discuss two common methods used to harvest wild mushrooms. The first, obviously, is to cut a wild mushroom at the base of its stalk or at its point of attachment to its substrate. This technique is very useful if you already know the identity of your wild mushroom and you are harvesting for debris-free consumption. However, if you are harvesting for identification purposes, I strongly recommend harvesting the entire mushroom. This means you may have to dig a bit around the base of the mushroom if it's in the soil. Full specimen harvesting is important because several key features, including a bulbous base, or a vulva, mycelial color, or even a unique and unexpected host, are oftentimes located in the soil. And if you just cut the mushroom at its stalk at ground level, you will be missing out on some very important characteristics that will help you identify your mushroom. Now, what about sustainability of harvesting mushrooms? Is cutting a mushroom less detrimental to future populations compared to pulling up a mushroom from the ground? Well, peer-reviewed research suggests that pulling or cutting a mushroom has no discernible effect on future yields of fruiting bodies, nor on species richness within an area. Remember, mushrooms are the reproductive structures of fungi. The ecological role of a mushroom is similar to the role of fruit on a fruit tree, hence the term fruiting body to describe a mushroom. So many people will make the comparison that harvesting mushrooms is no more detrimental than harvesting apples from apple trees. My thoughts on the subject are this. Just as someone would not forage every single apple from a neighbor's apple tree without first asking for permission or offering a gift in return, or at the very least saying thank you, perhaps we should not approach the foraging of wild mushrooms with anything less than intention, gratitude, respect, and awareness that every single action of ours is intimately bound to a consequence. So forage responsibly and respectfully, and be a good example for others to do the same. Moving forward, let's discuss edible mushrooms. Now, I gotta tell you up front, not every mushroom that is listed as being edible is tolerated by everyone. Just like some people have sensitivities to common foods in the grocery store, some people have sensitivities to wild foods, including to wild mushrooms. To reduce the likelihood that you would experience any negative effects upon consuming a mushroom that is listed as being edible, I recommend starting with a small amount if it's your first time eating that mushroom, and I recommend cooking it well. And yes, I recommend cooking all wild edible mushrooms before ingesting them. Now, I know these are broad recommendations and many people might take issue with them. I'm fine with that. But if you want to reduce the likelihood of experiencing gastrointestinal distress or cramps or indigestion, start small and cook well. And of course, forage intelligently. meaning never eat an unidentified wild mushroom. Always be 100% positive of your identification before consuming a wild mushroom. Forage in clean areas, as mushrooms can bioaccumulate toxins. And when in doubt, don't throw it out, but save your unidentified mushroom and learn to properly identify it. Then proceed accordingly. So right now I'm going to briefly discuss 8 very easy to identify wild edible mushrooms that grow in the northeast and mid-Atlantic region of the United States. I'm not going to go into too much detail on any one particular species because there's already plenty of information on several websites, in several books, and I do have several videos on the following species. I'm only going to introduce you to them so that you know which ones to start with. I encourage you to do more research them more thoroughly before going out harvesting and consuming them. Of course, we are going to start with morels because these mushrooms are arguably among the most prized of all edible fungi. In my neck of the woods, they are some of the first edible mushrooms to appear during the spring months. Morels have honeycomb pitted caps that sit on top of stalks, and for the most part, when you cut these mushrooms in half, you will see that the insides are typically hollow from top to bottom. Morels grow terrestrially from the soil in association with a wide variety of trees, including elm, tulip poplar, apple, sycamore, hickory, ash, and pine trees. Oyster mushrooms comprise several different species in the Pleurotus genus, and depending on where you live, you may encounter oyster mushrooms growing every season of the year. And that's true where I live in Pennsylvania. Oyster mushrooms typically grow on wood. Their caps vary in color, though most wild varieties display shades of white, cream, tan, yellow, or brown, and underneath the cap of an oyster mushroom, you will see gills that run the complete length of the cap and down the stalk if a stalk is present. Chanterelles are delicious, edible mushrooms that fruit during the summer and autumn months where I live. And these mushrooms are mycorrhizal with a variety of trees, including oaks and hemlocks, meaning you will typically find these mushrooms growing terrestrially from the soil. Chanterelles typically display vase-shaped morphologies with undersides comprised of blunt folds or ridges rather than distinct plate-like gills. Black trumpets are closely related to chanterelles, so it's no surprise that the two groups of mushrooms share similar features. Black trumpets are mycorrhizal, and you will find them growing terrestrially in association with oaks, hemlocks, and pine trees during the summer and autumn months. Like chanterelles, black trumpets are typically vase-shaped with an outer or undersurface comprised of blunt folds or ridges, rather than clearly defined plate-like gills. Chicken of the woods is one of the easiest mushrooms to positively identify because it is among the brightest and largest of all fungi in the forest. This mushroom starts to appear during the later weeks of spring, and you will continue to see fruitings throughout the summer and autumn months. Chicken of the woods contains a bright orange cap, and as a polypore mushroom, it contains pores on its underside rather than gills. These pores can vary in color depending on the species, though you will usually see either yellow or peach-colored pores. Also, depending on the species, you will see chicken of the woods on or very near deciduous and conifer trees, both living and dead trees. Hen of the woods is another polypore mushroom, but rather than displaying bright shades of orange and yellow, this mushroom instead camouflages itself perfectly with its brown and tan and grayish colors. Hen of the woods grows either directly on trees or a little away from trees, and this mushroom is most commonly found late summer through autumn, growing in association with oak trees, though you will also see this mushroom growing on or alongside beech trees, maple trees, and cherry trees. Lion's mane is one of the easiest mushrooms to positively identify. The only other mushrooms that look like lion's mane are other mushrooms in the Hericium genus, all of which are considered to be edible. Lion's mane consists of a cushiony mass of downward pointing teeth or spines. It grows directly on wood, typically on hardwood trees, either living or dead trees, and it typically grows summer through autumn where I live. And the last edible mushroom that I will briefly discuss is the puffball mushroom. And actually, there are lots of puffball mushrooms, but I'm just going to describe one that we call the giant puffball mushroom. It's incredibly easy to positively identify, and the only thing you'd mistake it for is a soccer ball or volleyball or a bag of trash in the woods. Puffballs are considered to be edible when their insides are still white and not discolored yellow or olive or purple. Again, obviously I only briefly discussed those 8 edible mushrooms, so I strongly encourage you to do more research on each of those species before harvesting and consuming them. And if you just scroll through my YouTube channel, you'll find plenty of videos on almost all of those mushrooms. I do realize that I could have discussed about 150 more edible mushrooms, including some people's favorites, but for brevity's sake, and to just get you started, I'm going to stop with those 8 edible species that commonly grow in the Northeast. Now, what about poisonous mushrooms? Well, it's no secret that kingdom fungi houses some pretty toxic species. And when learning to forage mushrooms for the table, it is absolutely essential that you also learn which species are toxic. And it's important that you learn which species are toxic during the early stages of your foraging education. I'm now going to briefly introduce you to 5 common poisonous mushrooms. And again, this is not an exhaustive list of poisonous mushrooms, nor am I going to go into too much detail on any one species. So I strongly encourage you to do more research on the following poisonous mushrooms. The destroying angel is one of the deadliest organisms on planet Earth due to its concentration of toxic compounds known as amatoxins. And when I say deadly, I mean deadly when ingested. You can safely touch and handle this mushroom, but under no circumstances should you ingest this mushroom. The destroying angel actually comprises a group of closely related mycorrhizal species, all of which are nearly pure white and grow terrestrially from the soil, typically during the summer and autumn months. The destroying angel contains a partial veil that breaks to leave a ring around the stalk, and this mushroom has a sac-like vulva located at the base of the stalk. The Deadly Gallerina is another poisonous mushroom that contains the same class of toxic compounds found in deadly amanita mushrooms. The Deadly Gallerina is a small brown saprotrophic mushroom that grows directly from wood, either from logs and stumps or even from wood chips. The Deadly Gallerina contains rusty brown gills in maturity. It contains a partial veil which breaks to leave a ring around its stalk, and its spore print is rusty brown. The green-spored lepiota is a common lawn mushroom associated with more poisoning reports than any other species in North America. Because of its large size and beautiful features, many people are drawn to this fungus, but most people who eat the green-spored lepiota get very sick. Ingestion of this mushroom can cause vomiting, diarrhea, and intestinal cramps that last for many hours. One very important key feature, as this mushroom's name so clearly states, is the green spore print. The jack-o'-lantern is a medium to large-sized poisonous mushroom that grows in dense clusters in association with wood during the summer and autumn seasons. The jack-o'-lantern is a gilled mushroom, and it contains a class of toxic compounds known as illudins that can cause severe gastrointestinal distress if consumed. So my recommendation is to obviously never eat the jack-o'-lantern mushroom. And the last poisonous fungus that I will include in this video is the sulfur tuft mushroom. This species is a small to medium-sized yellowish mushroom with greenish gills and purple-brown spores that grows in clusters on both deciduous and conifer wood. The sulfur tuft typically grows in the colder months of the year, though sometimes you will see it during the summer months as well. Symptoms of toxicity can take up to 8 hours to manifest, and these symptoms can include gastrointestinal distress, nausea, diarrhea, vomiting, and vision impairment. Interestingly, out of all the described mushroom species worldwide, only a small percentage of them, believe it or not, are very toxic. The vast majority of fungi actually pose no or only minor harm following ingestion. And in many cases, gastrointestinal disturbances are the only symptoms reported. Again, I strongly encourage you to do more research on all those poisonous mushrooms we just mentioned, learn them, learn which poisonous mushrooms grow in your area, familiarize yourself with them, and forage intelligently. And of course, no current discussion of mushrooms would be complete without mentioning medicinal mushrooms. The scientific literature is quite replete with studies investigating the pharmacological properties of mushrooms and the unique compounds they possess. Research suggests that certain species of fungi, and more specifically their bioactive compounds, may offer support for mental health issues and immune system regulation, and may be useful in the treatment of certain types of cancer. Now, there's plenty of information on medicinal fungi online. If you scroll through my YouTube archives, you'll find plenty of videos on medicinal mushrooms, so I won't dive too deeply into the topic here. But to get you started, here are a few mushrooms worth investigating. Turkey tail, lion's mane, reishi, cordyceps, maitake, chaga, and birch polypore. So up until this point, we covered a lot of information, a lot of basic but useful information to help get you started. And of course, there are plenty of opportunities for additional learning. For example, books and field guides. One of the most common questions that I receive is, Adam, what mushroom books and field guides do you recommend? And the answer is, it depends. It really depends on where you live, because in my experiences, the best mushroom books and the best field guides are really region specific. So I encourage you to seek out the books that pertain to mushrooms in your region. Around here, the Northeast, Great Lakes, Mid-Atlantic region, I recommend mushroom books by the following authors: Alan and Arlene Bissett, Walter Sturgeon, William Rudy, and Tim Baroni. In addition to using books and field guides, another great way to improve your mushroom hunting skills is to visit mushroom-related websites. Mushroom Observer and iNaturalist are two popular websites that are worth looking into. And if you're on Facebook, I'd recommend browsing some of the mushroom identification groups. But be warned, you will probably encounter some loose cannons and strong egos in some of those groups. But if you can tune that madness out, you will have the opportunity to learn a lot. And last but certainly not least, one of the best ways to improve your skills is to join a mushroom club and to attend local, regional, and even national forays. It's been my experience that there's no substitute for learning from other mushroom enthusiasts, especially within a community-like setting that a mushroom club provides. Check out the North American Mycorrhizal Association's website for an extensive list of mushroom clubs. So, if you've been on the fence for a while now about this little thing called mushroom hunting and you weren't sure whether to pursue this hobby or not, hopefully this video has influenced your decision in a positive manner. Remember, this is just one video to get you started, and we covered some really basic information. I certainly left out a lot, that was intentional. No video could ever cover everything there is to know about mushrooms because, frankly, there is no such thing as knowing everything there is to know about mushrooms. But give it a shot because it's worth it. Foraging mushrooms I'd characterize as supremely rewarding, at least in my eyes. But over the years, I think you will realize that nature connection, not mushroom identification, but real nature connection between you and the land that you live on is the ultimate prize. Thank you so much for watching this video. I truly appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to the Learn Your Land YouTube channel, I encourage you to do that. You can also head on over to learnyourland.com. We can stay in touch if you sign up for the email newsletter. You can provide your first name and your email address, and I send out a couple newsletters per month. You can also follow me on social media at Learn Your Land on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks again for watching. Happy mushroom hunting.